Yichud, we have no understanding of how it works and why it works. It's completely concealed. It's called Anhoga Nisteris. It is concealed. A classic example of that is when they were killing Rabbi Akiva. By the way, Rabbi Akiva died on Yom Kippur in Caesarea, in Caesarea, 2,000 years ago. So when Rabbi Akiva was dying and the Romans were killing him, they were raking his back with combs and so on. So the Malachim stood in front of the Rosh and said, Zu Torah v'zu schora? This is the Torah, this is the reward for the Torah? I mean, Rabbi Akiva is responsible for the whole transmission of the oral law. Without Rabbi Akiva, there would be no oral law, because all the Talmidim, the 24,000 Talmidim, died, and he had to bring it back. So the Malachim said, this is what he gets for doing the Torah? You see? And it was a very powerful argument. So what happened? So the Rosh says to them, one more statement, and I wipe out the world. Now, excuse me, I mean, God doesn't talk that way. This is not edel, as they say, you know. This is not gentle and so on, you know. What God was really doing is flexing his muscle. He says, wait a minute, you guys don't stop complaining, I'm going to wipe you guys off the map. And God doesn't have to wipe anybody off the map. In order for the universe to exist, he has to think 24/7, exist. If he is ever distracted, we're gone in an instant, you know. So please don't distract God, or we're all gone, you see. But he told that to the Malachim. So the question is, what kind of an answer is this? You know, if you don't shut up, so to speak, I'll wipe you guys out. No, that's not what God did. What God did is he answered them. Oh, and by the way, he said, if you ask me again, I will restore the world to Tohu Vavoyu. Right? Which obviously means the whole world is wiped out, because he's going back to the beginning of Bereshit. What was God really saying? He said, wait a minute. The fact, and then you begin to understand how difficult it is to comprehend the Anhogas HaYichud, which is the guaranteed, the backup system. Okay? Because what God, the Rosh said, listen, the Malachim were right. Based on Mishpat, how could Rabbi Akiva be dying this way? It's impossible. It's contrary to everything that they understood, which is justice. But the Rosh said, what you are witnessing, the death of Rabbi Akiva, in this tortuous manner, is the Anhogas HaYichud, which you cannot understand. Now, you want to understand it? That means I'm going to have to reveal it to you. The logic of the death of Rabbi Akiva in this manner. The problem is that if I reveal it to you, then the Satan will know and everybody will understand my ways. But I don't want them to understand my ways, because the Satan can always prosecute and say, wait a minute, you can't do this. You want to save the guy? No. You see, so therefore, the death of Rabbi Akiva in that manner was a classic example of the Anhogas HaYichud. It is something which is beyond our understanding. We don't have the rules and the regulations of how it works. There are, throughout history, there are classic examples of the Anhogas HaYichud, that it doesn't make sense in our eyes. And one of the greatest examples, which we know, of course, is the Shoah, the Holocaust. The Holocaust is a classic example of Anhogas HaYichud. It's the equivalent of the death of Rabbi Akiva. This man to die this way, the Jewish people to die this way in concentration camps, being burnt alive. What is this? This is the Anhogas HaYichud, which nobody understands. In the end, it will be revealed. When the Mashiach comes, then God will reveal every idea of why all of this happened, and we will then understand how the Anhogas HaYichud works. But in any case, the main idea to remember is the basic mechanism of the Anhogas HaYichud to guarantee everything is Yisurin, or suffering. Except we do not understand how it's applied, you see. And that's the classic thing with Moshe Rabbeinu said. Rosh v'toivloi, evil people prosper, but tzaddik v'raloi, and righteous people suffer terribly. There's no logic in this. This is not mishpat. And nobody understands the answer. That's the classic question that Moshe Rabbeinu asked the Rosh. In any case, those are the three series of actions that the Rosh does. Now that we understand this, all of these ideas, we can now understand Rosh Hashanah. If a guy opens a business, yes? Why does he open a business? He wants to make money. The bottom line, right? The bottom line is profits. Okay, so what does he do? If you open a business, you don't just walk away and say, I'll see you around. You have to evaluate that business. You have to assess that business to see, am I making money? You see? And if I'm not making money, why? Because maybe I have too much inventory. I don't have enough advertisement. Whatever, I don't have enough salesmen. There'd be many reasons why business is not working. The key concept is that for a business to be successful, you have to have what's called a periodic assessment. Correct? Usually that's done annually, once a year. Why? Because what you do is you assess the business, and then you think about, okay, what are the remedies that I could put in place? And you have to give it time to work, a year time. Then you come back a year later, right? And you check it out. Did it work or not? If it worked, fine. If it didn't work, I got to reevaluate, reassess, right? And I have to readjust. Makes sense. That's exactly what the Rebbeinu Shem does, isn't it? What's the business of God? It's not prophets. Maybe it is prophets. The people are prophets. In any case, but what is it really? The answer is, it's the tikkun. The only thing God is interested is this. It's almost like there's only one thing that, so to speak, occupies God's mind. When do I come back? When are the Jews going to bring me back? You see, that's called the tikkun hakloli, the total rectification of the entire creation. This is what the Rebbeinu Shem is concerned with. But the Rebbeinu Shem is always assessing. Well, where is it standing? You see, have the Jews done sufficiently mitzvahs, tshuva? No. Then I have to give them yisurit or whatever. You see, for instance, in Spain, the Jews were there for 1,000 years. They were there even before the Spaniards, right? But the Jews, in many cases, had assimilated, or they had become modernized to an extent where they were not doing their job. So therefore, the Rebbeinu Shem allowed Ferdinand and Isabella to have this Michigan idea, because it cost Spain incredible sophistication of civilization, to throw the Jews out, either accept Christianity or not. Because what the Rebbeinu Shem said, and this is the reassessment, that in order for the tikkun to happen, I need to move the entire Jewish people from Spain across Europe. You know, what he did is he evaluated the Jews and decided that they are not doing sufficient tikkun. Therefore, I have to move them to another spot, and in that spot they can do the tikkun. You see, what I'm saying is that the major consideration of Rosh Hashanah is to assess the tikkun. Are you contributing to the tikkun or not? And if you're not, then do I have to move you somewhere else? And in that situation or position, there you will have a different situation. You will be tested, and then if you succeed in that test, you will therefore move you advance the tikkun process. You see, it's not a judgment particularly on your mitzvahs or averos. Of course, that's considered, but it's considered within the concept of where are you in the tikkun process. You know, it's like a guy goes to a factory, sits down, or the boss goes to the factory, and he evaluates the factory. You see, so what he evaluates isn't so much, well, is this guy doing good or bad? The question is this guy making money for me or not? That's the real consideration. And of course, within that consideration is what? Is to look at, is he good or bad? Is he incompetent or competent? And if he's not competent, so what does the boss say? Well, you cannot work in this room anymore. I'm going to demote you, or maybe send you a pink slip, which is you're out, right? That is the readjustment, you see. So of course the person is evaluated in terms of bad and good and bad, but the real evaluation is whatever happened to the tikkun process that you are supposed to do. Because remember, every Jew is assigned to a particular area in the upper worlds where the spiritual is. Every Jew. And you are designated to do it. You don't do it, guess what? Nobody else can do it. So what happens if you don't do it? You got to come back in a Gilgul. That's why there's Gilgul. You got to come back until you get it straight. And that for us is a tremendous chesed. You see, if he gave it to somebody else, it's over for us, right? But what the Baruch Hashem says is, I want you to come back. You need to finish your job, you see? And that's what people do. They come back in reincarnation after reincarnation after incarnation, and so on. Because that's their job. Therefore, what the Baruch Hashem does is he assesses you in terms of, are you enlightening the area, are you bringing my presence back in the area that has been assigned to you? You see, that's the key concern on Rosh Hashanah. Very important idea. So Rosh Hashanah is much more global. It's not, the achet, bang, 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 No, that's not of course that's important, but the real concern isn't the achet. It's where are you standing? That's a very important idea to know in terms of the real issue and what you have to do to plead to the Rebbeinu Shalom. That's going to tell us how you can defend yourself, you see. And even lawyers have to know this, because guess what? They're also being judged. Everybody's being judged, including the judges, you see. Now, it's interesting. You now understand that Rosh Hashanah is much more global. It doesn't matter, well, you did bad, good, I'm going to punish you. No. It's the tikkun process. That's the major idea. But here's the problem. The Baruch Hashem didn't have to tell us. He could have come into his office, so to speak, take a look at everybody, right? And in a nanosecond, in an instant of time, he just, like the Mishnah says, beskira achas, in one glance, he has judged or evaluated every creature, every living form, including everything. Okay. He does it in an instant of time. So the idea is, he doesn't need to tell us. He could have sat down in his office, in one instant of time judged everything, and that's it. And we would obviously know the consequences of what? Of what we did. Right? Why did he tell us? He doesn't have to tell us. It's like the boss goes into a factory, right? He goes into his office, he evaluates all the workers, everything, right? And then, he leaves the office and he gives his managers, okay, this guy you can promote, this guy you can demote, this guy you can fire him. He doesn't have to tell anybody. And the answer to that is because the Baruch Hashem loves us and he wanted us to do a tremendous chesed. He wants to tell us 30 days before Rosh Hashanah, Elul, that I'm going to assess the Bria because I want you to do tshuva. And if you do tshuva, what happens? Then, as a result of the tshuva, you will influence the verdict. That's why. He doesn't want to harm us in any way. So what he tells us, I want you to influence the verdict. Please, do tshuva, you see. Because he wants us to have a great year. He doesn't want to move us to some other part of the world or some other parnasa or to go from wealth to poverty in order to do the tikkun. He doesn't want to do that. So he gives us a chance. That's why he told us. Very important idea. That's why we know that there is a Rosh Hashanah. Because he wants us to influence the verdict. You see. Interesting. That's why we know there's a Rosh Hashanah. And not only that, it's not only that chesed that he did to us. So so we have 30 days to get our act together, as they say, to shape up. Right? That's really what it is. 30 days. Now, what happens next? Then Rosh Hashanah happens, which is what he said would happen, right? And bam-o, there's the judgment. But wait a minute. What about all those guys who were sleeping? Or all those guys who did a tshuva, half-baked or whatever, and so on and so forth? Oh, those guys didn't even bother. So Baruch Hashem says, I need to give you an appeals process. What's an appeal, right? You go to court, you lose the case, right? But there's an appeals court, right? Thank God for that, right? And so on. The Aser Simei Tshuva is the appeals process. You see, it's interesting. That's really what it is. It's for those guys who slacked off or didn't do the job. It's to help them get in also into a great year. You see, so that's the second chesed God did for us. First, he told us what he was going to do. Then he gave us an appeals process. But there's a third thing he did for us. That's how much God wants us to do tshuva. You see, because he's really our Father. He's Avinu Malkeinu. And he's really more our Avinu than Malkeinu. You know what the third thing he does? It's Yom Kippur. Why is Yom Kippur so special? You see, because on Yom Kippur, what he did is an astounding idea. Who is the problem? Is the Satan. Because he's the heavenly DA. He's the heavenly district attorney. He's the prosecuting attorney, right? And our problem always is this guy. Because he's prosecuting us, and he's saying, you call that a tshuva? He's standing us in front of Bezdin, and he says, give me a break. You call that a tshuva? You know, this guy said, you know, maybe I should do tshuva, maybe. And that was all he did. So the Sultan's going to get up there and say, excuse me, is this guy for real? So therefore, what he does is destroys that tshuva as a claim, as a defense. So you know what the Baruch Hashem did? He dismissed the Makatreg for one day. Yes, the Sultan has 3 jobs. The first job is a Yetzer Hara, right? He's a tempter. He tries to get us to sin. The second job, he's called the Yetzer Hara, first role. The second role, he's called the Sultan. He's the adversary. He is the Makatreg. He's the great prosecuting attorney that is trying to find us guilty. That's a second job. And the third job is if we are found guilty, then he puts on his third hat, which is his third role, and then he's the Malach HaMavis, the angel of death. That doesn't mean he kills, but he also is assigned the task of executing the judgment of the court. 3 jobs for that Malach. So what the Baruch Hashem does, he says to Satan, he says, listen, I'm going to allow you to be a Yetzer Hara on Yom Kippur. And I'm even going to allow you to be the executioner. Fine. But you know, you cannot prosecute that day. He takes away the job. It's incredible. Here's a Satan getting all steamed up to prosecute, and he can't because he's been dismissed. It's called an enforced vacation. That's why the gematria of Has-Satan is is 364. Because for one day of the year, he's not the Satan. He can't prosecute. Could you believe that? Therefore what? Why is that so incredible? Because any tshuva that you have, even if it sounds absurd, right? It's accepted. Even if a guy says, you know, maybe I'll do tshuva, but I'm not really sure because I really want to do tshuva, but it's not a bad idea. Now, you call that a tshuva? What would you call that? Right? But on Yom Kippur, it's considered a tshuva. Of course, as far as it's concerned, you know, I mean, you know, it's not where, it's the greatest tshuva, you know, but it is considered a hero tshuva. And that is a claim or a defense on that day. Imagine what the Baruch Hashem did for us to influence the verdict. How far he extended himself. Therefore, we now understand what Rosh Hashanah really is. It's a global assessment. It's a reassessment of the entire creation. You see, and now we really can answer many questions. First question: what is the essence of Rosh Hashanah? Which I said, it's not judgment; it's assessment. It's a periodic assessment concerning the whole purpose of mankind, which is the Tikkun HaKlali, the whole rectification. Number one, why is the judgment one day a year? No, really we're judged every day, but that's concerning minor corrections if you did a sin and so on. But the global assessment is not judged or assessed except once a year, which makes sense, you see, because you have to give time to implement that which you have assessed. So therefore, the Yom HaDin of Rosh Hashanah is an assessment, so that only happens once a year, you see. But every day is a judgment on the immediate job you're doing. That's a tremendous difference between the two ideas. Now, what Jewish event does it correspond to? And the answer is, do you know what Rosh Hashanah really is? I'll tell you what it is. It's an Israeli holiday. It's not a Jewish holiday. It's an Israeli holiday. Now, before you look at me and say, are you out of your mind? Why is it an Israeli holiday? It's not a Jewish holiday at all. Because who was the individual that God wanted to be in Olam Haba? And the answer is Goyim. God never intended that the job of Tikkun should be only given to the Jews. He intended for all mankind, really, and that makes sense. You see, that all mankind should be in the future world. You see, the power to do Tikkun by one's acts, either mitzvahs, tshuva, yisurim, right? That's called Yisrael. That's what Yisrael really means. Yisrael does not refer to a nation. It refers to a power, a capacity. And guess what? Adam Rishon was the first Yisrael. He wasn't an Ivri, because the job was never intended to go to Ivri, you see. It was Yisrael. And it's only after 2,000 years that the Goyim, the nation of the world, didn't do the Tikkun. So then God said, I'm going to give the ability of Tikkun, which means the concept called Yisrael, or the term, I'm going to give it to Avram Avinu, because he's the only one doing the job. You see? So therefore what becomes obvious is the fact that Yisrael means our ability to do the Tikkun, which means we have a certain type of neshama, you see, and that has been taken away from the Goyim and given to the Jews, and it is now a Jewish enterprise to do the Tikkun of the Bria, of the entire creation. Therefore, the first one who could do the Tikkun wasn't Jewish, he was Israel, he was in Israel, an Israeli, right? When was he created? He was created on Aleph Tishrei. Guess what? So therefore God, on that annual day, assesses. That's the annual assessment. The Tikkun process, right, started on Rosh Hashanah with the creation of Adam, right, even though he wasn't Jewish. And therefore on Rosh Hashanah, annually it's reassessed again. You see? That's why I say that Rosh Hashanah is really an Israeli holiday. It is a holiday of Yisrael, not of Ivri. And that's why it happens on Rosh Hashanah, which is Aleph Tishrei, which is the day that Adam Harishon was created, you see. Great. So we've answered a certain amount of questions. But there's still other questions that beg an answer. Now, I'm going to tell you that there's a very big problem that has now arisen because of what the Rebbeinu Shem did. Here's the problem. The problem is this. If God, who's the boss, would have gone into a room, yes, and done the assessment himself without informing anybody, what's the problem? He does it in a nanosecond, right? And then he tells the manager, okay, here's the pink slips, demote this guy, promote that guy, right? But here's the problem. He wanted us to do tshuva, therefore he wanted us to influence the verdict, yes? But the problem is, that becomes an entire court case, doesn't it? Because then there's a heavenly tribunal, everybody's involved. If everybody's involved, guess what? Who else is involved? The Satan is involved. So by opening it up to courts, the heavenly tribunal, he has now allowed the Satan to prosecute the Jews. And that's bad news. You see, by doing us a tremendous chesed, he has opened it up to the courts by informing us, opened it up to the courts, and therefore has now positioned the Satan to condemn the Jewish people and make a mockery of their tshuva. It's almost like you want to say thank you and no thank you at the same time. So what's the Rebbeinu Shem going to do? You understand the incredible problem? Because we don't want a makatri, we don't want a prosecuting attorney. That's terrible for us. So what's the Rebbeinu Shem going to do? So he needs to stop the Satan. He can't dismiss him. So what does he do? He creates a mitzvah called shofar. The secret of shofar is it stops the Satan. How? Because as soon as the Rebbeinu Shem hears the shofar, he gets up from the kisei din, mishpat, and he goes into his private chambers. He leaves. That means he actually leaves the courtroom. And he leaves the Satan and everybody behind. When he hears the shofar, he goes into his private chambers, and from there he judges the Jews. But there, he doesn't have to defend what he does in front of a Satan who is upholding justice. There he activates the Anhogas HaYichud. You see? He activates the guaranteed, the backup system. the guarantee that the Jews will exist, and that's why they can never be eradicated in history. They will exist, they will guarantee to bring a tikkun to the whole creation, and they will get into Olam Haba. Guaranteed. Because he goes into his private chambers and he does what he wants to do. So we're saved, in a certain sense. We're saved because God has now activated the Anogas HaYichud to save us, you see. And now the Satan is going bananas. He's going crazy because he's just been dismissed. It's like the Supreme Court judge, right, gets up from the court and he says, okay, guys, court's over, right? No more in session. And the prosecutor says, what are you doing? You see? So the Baruch Shem says, it's over because the Jews have blown the shofar and therefore I'm now going to go in my private chambers, right? And I will judge them from there without a defending attorney, without a prosecuting attorney, and there's not even a jury, there's nothing. I myself will judge the Jews, but now it's not only mishpat, it's also yichud, which means that they are guaranteed now to exist. That's what the shofar does. The question is why? Why does the shofar do that? How does it do that? Just because we say we have tekiah, shvam through a tekiah, so therefore God gets up? Come on. What does this have to do with Anogas HaYichud? And the answer to that is the Akedah. You need to understand what the Akedah really was. When Avraham Avinu heard that the Baruch Shem said, by the way, you see the guy sleeping in the next room? Yes, that's my son. Kill him. That's the Akedah. Of course, God didn't say kill him. He said, V'halei oilo, bring him up as a sacrifice, which Avraham Avinu clearly interpreted, kill him. Okay, what did Avraham Avinu think? Here's what went through his mind. Kill him? Wait a minute. I'm a tremendous Baal Chesed. To kill him is axorius. It's exactly against my nature. How can I do that? You see, it's the exact opposite of what Avraham Avinu is. That's number one. Second problem. There's no such thing as human sacrifice. God doesn't sacrifice humans. What kind of nonsense is this? But the Baruch Shem is telling me to sacrifice my son because he's interpreting, bring him up as an oilo, as a sacrifice. Third thing, Avraham Avinu understood the incredible greatness and worth of a man. What do you mean? You didn't just slaughter people? He understood that. And it went contrary to all his values of what mankind is. Fourth problem. Wait a minute. That guy is my son. If I kill him, I'm killing my son. Fifth problem. That guy is Jewish. If I kill him, I'm killing a Jew. Sixth problem. That guy is the last Jew. There's no Jew after him because that was it, right? Yitzchak, right? That's the last Jew. So if I kill him, that's the last Jew. Can you imagine what he's thinking, Avraham Avinu is thinking, right? 6 unbelievable problems. But the 7th was the biggest. 7 difficulties. What was the 7th? Wait a minute. This makes no sense. The Baruch Shem told me a nevuah, prophecy. Ki b'Yitzchak yikol chazora. In other words, your descendants will go through Yitzchak. Yes? And now the Baruch Shem is telling me, kill him. Now we know, right, that if Yitzchak is dead, he clearly cannot be a descendant. Right? It's obvious, right? So then God has now contradicted himself. You see. That is the worst part of war. Avraham Avinu was an incredible thinker. Many people hold he was the one who introduced Egypt to many of their skills and so on. That it really came from Avraham Avinu. And Avraham Avinu was an incredible philosopher, right? What's the worst thing you can do for philosophy? It's called to present 2 ideas which are mutually exclusive. You see, now you may do something and the idea is unknown, but you can't tell me A and not A at the same instant in time. You can't tell me, well, Yitzchak is going to exist and be my descendant, and not exist at the exact same time. It doesn't make sense. That is pure. It's called mutually exclusive commands. which is totally illogical. In other words, the Rebbeinu Shalom was appearing to Avraham Avinu as irrational. Excuse me, you don't make any sense. God, you don't make any sense. It's impossible. That was the worst nisayon of all from Avraham Avinu. What did Avraham Avinu do? You can imagine how deep he had to dig into his emunah. He said, listen, to himself, none of this makes sense. Forget about the emotional difficulties that I'm having with all this. This whole thing is a nightmare. It's like an Alice in Wonderland scenario. You're right, and you're right. It's an impossible scenario. But I know one thing. If the Rebbeinu Shalom did it, it has to be emes. And I have no idea how. Now we know, because he said, V'halei li'oilo, bring him up for a sacrifice, which means don't kill him. God never told him to kill him. So that was the out that the Rebbeinu Shalom gave himself. But Avraham Avinu had interpreted that to kill him. So Avraham Avinu did an incredible thing. He realized that the Rebbeinu Shalom is irrational, but at the same time he knew that this cannot be. This cannot be that the Rebbeinu Shalom is irrational. And I'm going to do it afal pikein. And he went, took Yitzchak, of course, we know the whole story. Why did Rebbeinu Shalom do that? Why did the Rebbeinu Shalom appear to Avraham Avinu in an irrational way? Because that's really what this type of nisayon was. It was, I mean, the therapeutic term would be, it was psychotic. It's really what it is. Because a psychotic is irrational. You know, you can do the same thing at the same time, even though they're both opposite. And the answer is really that it was a tremendous thing that the Rebbeinu Shalom did for us. Because Avraham Avinu did what? He listened to the Rebbeinu Shalom, even though the Rebbeinu Shalom appeared to him irrational. So the Rebbeinu Shalom said to Avraham Avinu, because you did, and you believed in me, and you did, and you took Yitzchak to kill him, okay, even though I appeared to you irrational, and it's impossible to do even this commandment, therefore, the Jews will now have a merit, that if they ever ask me to be irrational, which is the anhogas hayichud, I will do it. You see, the power of the shofar comes from the power of the nisayon of Avraham Avinu and the Akedah. Because he acted, even though the Rebbeinu Shalom appeared to be irrational, Hanhogas hayichud, guess what? It's irrational. Rabbi Akiva dying and they're raking his skin is irrational. It's impossible. How can a God of Mishpat be doing this? You see, and that's what Hanhogas hayichud is. It doesn't make any sense. Tzadik v'toivloi, or tzadik v'raloi, Rosh v'toivloi, is irrational really. Because it's contrary to what the Rebbeinu Shalom characterizes himself as mishpat, as a shofet emes, a dayan emes. So because he did that, therefore we Jews have the right to ask the Rebbeinu Shalom to be irrational, so to speak. In other words, he appears irrational, and that is the shofar that gets the Rebbeinu Shalom out of the court, which is rational, to the chambers, which is, the Rebbeinu Shalom now behaves what we think is irrational, but it's not. Obviously, at the end of time, it is because of the Akedah. And that is where the Akedah is read. You see, because that is the instrument that gives the power of the shofar to work. You see, and that's why we're saved. Now that we understand this, we understand all the ideas, all the questions I asked. For instance, why is Rosh Hashanah Yom Tov? How in the world can we be sitting in a festive meal when we're about to be